Okay, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating stack of sources all about visual perception and human behavior, too.
Yeah, we've got this collection of texts, descriptions of images, things from psychological studies, experiments.
Right. It's quite a mix.
It is. And they all touch on how our brains process, all the visual stuff flooding in constantly.
And our mission here really is to unpack these sources, see what they reveal about how we actually see the world, how we interpret things,
Yeah.
especially faces,
Faces are huge, yeah.
and maybe even what our interpretations tell us about, well, ourselves. It's about understanding the shortcuts, the complexities, the whole system inside our heads.
Kind of a look under the hood at the automatic stuff, the unconscious processes that, build the reality you see.
Exactly. So let's start with something that always grabs us, faces. One source looks at that famous scene in Hitchcock's Psycho, the one with the mirror.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic example.
And the source points out something really unsettling about how that shot works, how it plays on our visual system.
Well, it's fascinating because Hitchcock, maybe he didn't even know the science, but he tapped into something deep. The source talks about physiognomic asymmetry,
Okay.
how the mirror image feels off. Because our brains, they're sort of wired to look for information, psychological cues, more strongly on the left side of a person's face.
Our left, they're right.
Exactly, our left as we look at them, which in the mirror, that's reflecting her actual left side, but it's on the right side of the mirror image. It gets confusing.
Right. The source describes her in that scene.
Yeah.
She seems indecisive, right? Holding the money, staring. You see her actual face, partly shadowed, and then the reflection showing the other side.
Mm-hmm.
There's a real tension.
Yeah, and our brain is scrambling, trying to piece together what she's thinking or feeling. The scene makes our eyes dart back and forth, trying to gather cues from both the face and the reflection, almost treating both as that preferred side.
So it creates this conflict in us.
A perceptual cognitive conflict, yeah. Our own sort of hesitation mirroring hers. It's brilliant filmmaking, really, using how we see.
And this whole idea of faces revealing things, it's not new.
Oh, definitely not. The sources mention physiognomy, that old 19th century idea. This belief you could read personality, even like criminal traits, right in someone's face.
Which the source calls pseudo-scientific enthusiasm, quite
Oh,
rightly.
yeah, makes you think of Shakespeare, right? Macbeth. There's no art to find the mind's construction in the face.
Exactly. People knew even then it wasn't reliable.
But the idea stuck around. Clinicians, police,
Right.
they had these anthropometric photo albums trying to spot patterns.
Trying to find the criminal type or whatever.
Well, right, and the source makes that funny point. Even a basic ID photo can make anyone look a bit dodgy.
So true. We've all had that photo. But back to asymmetry. The sources say our faces are actually more asymmetrical than we usually realize. They talk about a study, image 3, I think.
Yeah, where they took a photo, split it down the middle, and mirrored each half to create two new faces. One pure left side, one pure right side. And the finding was when people had to judge which one looked more like the original person or, better for identifying them, they tended to pick the face made from the left half, which means the person's actual right side of the face from our view.
Huh. So we lean on that side more for identity cues. Why?
Well, the sources give a couple of possibilities, no single answer yet. One is maybe that side of the face, the person's right, our left view, just statistically has slightly more stable identity info. Maybe it's a bit wider, things like that.
Okay.
The other idea is brain-based. Information from our left visual field, which includes the right side of the face we're looking at, goes primarily to the brain's right hemisphere.
And the right hemisphere is the face specialist.
It's highly specialized for face recognition, yeah. So maybe that info gets processed a bit more efficiently, gets a slight head start.
Makes sense.
Although, our eyes are always moving, scanning, so both sides of the face send info to both hemispheres eventually. It's complicated. And it gets even trickier with emotions because the right hemisphere also seems to dominate emotional expression. It controls the muscles on the left side of the face.
Wait, hang on. So emotion shows more on the person's left side. But we might look more to their right side, our left, for interpretation. That feels like a mismatch.
It does, and the source basically says, yeah, it's confusing. There's no real consensus on how asymmetry plays out differently for perceiving identity versus emotion. It's still debated.
Wow. It just shows how much is going on when we just, look at someone.
Layers and layers of processing we're totally unaware of.
It really makes you pause and think about those quick impressions, those snap judgments we make based on a face. How much is that just our biology? these tendencies we didn't even know we had.
Absolutely. Our visual system isn't just passively recording, it's interpreting right from the start, like an editor.
And that leads nicely into another way our internal world shapes things: projection. The sources bring up the Thematic Apperception Test, the TAT.
Right, the T8, a classic projective test. Used a lot in therapy, psychiatry.
And projection here, the source defines it as, well, seeing the outside world based on what's inside your own head, basically.
Right, precisely. You perceive an object or a person, or in this case an image, but that perception is heavily filtered through or shaped by your own thoughts, feelings, behaviors, your whole inner landscape.
So the TIA uses these deliberately ambiguous images.
Exactly. Open to interpretation. The source calls them filled with implications, ambiguities, and uncertainty. They're like blank screens.
A canvas for personal exploration, it says.
Yeah. The idea is the stories you tell about these vague pictures, the themes, the characters' feelings, what happens next that reveal stuff about you, material for a clinician to understand deeper psychological states.
It reminds me of that W.H. Auden quote the source included: "I can't read a book more than it reads me."
Perfect analogy. Same goes for an image like this. It's not just you looking at it, it's kind of looking back, reflecting your own mind.
So seeing isn't passive at all. It's tied up with our own thoughts, feelings, our history.
Deeply.
How much of what you think you're subjectively seeing every day is actually being colored by that internal state? Not just in a test, but like looking at the news or people on the street.
It's a really profound point. Perception is subjective, always influenced by who we are inside.
And that inner state
Yeah.
changes.
Right.
It's not fixed.
Yeah.
Which brings us to Wilhelm Max Wundt, a big name in psychology history.
Huge name. Opened the very first experimental psychology lab, Leipzig.
And the source mentions his work trying to classify temperaments based on emotions.
Yeah, he built on that ancient idea of the four humors, came up with his own model. Melancholic, choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic. Tried to map them out.
Using axes like emotional, non-emotional, changeable, unchangeable.
Right. He even had this color coding system that apparently influenced some later theories.
But the key point the source makes is, while we think of personality as stable, Wundt's framework is also useful for thinking about changing moods, like your morning mood versus your evening mood.
Exactly. It's not just about fixed traits, our internal state shifts. And that's crucial because it makes you wonder, how do those shifts, our mood, stress levels, how might they affect not just interpretation, like with the tight, but maybe even more basic visual processing?
How we handle visual information itself.
Yeah. Which leads us perfectly to visual ambiguity and illusions, like the Hermann grid.
Ah, yes, the Hermann grid, that famous illusion. Source 6 has it. The grid of black squares, white lines, and those ghostly gray dots at the intersections.
Not that aren't really there.
Right. And they vanish the second you try to look right at them. It's so weird.
It feels like magic, but it tells us something important about central versus peripheral vision, how they work together or sometimes against each other.
So how does it work? Why do the dots appear?
Well, the simplified explanation involves how cells in your retina, the light-sensitive ones, are grouped. These are called receptive fields. They overlap. In your central vision, where you focus, these groups are small and tightly packed. In your peripheral vision, they're larger. And there's this thing called lateral inhibition. Basically, cells getting strong signals can kind of dampen down the signals from their neighbors. It helps sharpen edges.
So at the white intersections in your peripheral vision.
Right. Those larger peripheral receptive fields are getting blasted with light from white bands in 4 directions. Compare that to a receptor on just a straight white band, it's getting less intense white light overall from its surroundings. So the intersection points peripherally get more inhibition, more dampening down of their signal compared to points on the lines. And that relative difference makes the intersection seem dimmer or gray.
Ah, so it's a comparison effect in the periphery.
Exactly. It's relative darkness created by the processing.
But why do they vanish when you look straight at them?
Because then you're using your central vision. The receptive fields are much smaller, more precise. The field centered on the intersection is basically just seeing white lines. It doesn't get that same level of surrounding blast compared to its neighbors within the central focus area. So no extra inhibition, no gray dot. The illusion needs that fuzzy peripheral comparison.
Wow. So it's not just light hitting the eye, it's the brain actively processing, comparing, editing.
Constructing. It's showing us perception is an active construction, not just passive reception. These glitches reveal the machinery.
Makes you wonder what other subtle edits are happening all the time that we don't notice.
All the time, which ties into how we handle information that isn't clear, how we deal with uncertainty. There's another test mentioned, the What Do You See test, source 7.
Right. This involves showing images. Sometimes parts are masked or revealed slowly.
Yeah, using a mask, revealing things sequentially. The idea is to see how people respond when parts are unclear or hidden. You describe everything, even what you think might be in the masked bits.
And the goal is similar to tests measuring intolerance of ambiguity.
Exactly. How comfortable are you when things aren't definite? How quickly do you jump to conclusions, or how long do you hold on to an initial idea even when new, maybe conflicting info comes in?
Okay, so what did they find?
Well, there are individual differences. Some people spot changes or express uncertainty faster. Others seem more loyal to their first perception, or stubborn, as the source puts it. They stick with it longer.
But is that really seeing it differently or just refusing to change their mind?
That's the tricky part, the source points out. Hard to disentangle pure perception from cognitive style, or maybe even just reluctance to say I was wrong.
Yeah, okay.
But interestingly, how people perform on this kind of task does tend to correlate with cognitive flexibility or rigidity in other areas.
A correlation, not causation.
Right. It doesn't make you rigid, but it might reflect a general tendency in how you process information. We all need some tolerance for ambiguity, obviously, to recognize, say, a chair from different angles. But high anxiety, the source notes, can increase that stubbornness.
And there was a surprising historical angle, too.
Yeah, really fascinating. Developed around the end of World War II, psychologists, partly government-funded, were actually looking for personality traits they thought might support democratic governance. It sounds a bit strange now, maybe.
Wow. Seriously.
Yeah. And they found correlations suggesting that extreme rigidity in handling ambiguity, like on this test, linked up with things like a stronger need for security, loyalty to hierarchy.
So how you deal with a fuzzy picture was seen as potentially reflecting something about your view of society.
That was the idea they were exploring. It gives this test this whole other layer. It highlights different styles of navigating uncertainty, but with this unexpected historical backstory.
It really shows how perception isn't just about the eyes. It connects to our thinking style, maybe even our broader worldview.
Definitely. It's all interconnected.
So let's try and pull this together. We've covered quite a bit from these sources. We started with faces, that biological pull, the asymmetry thing.
How our wiring shapes that first glance.
Then projection, the teat, how our inner world colors what we see.
Seeing ourselves in ambiguous images.
Reminding us moods change, affecting our state.
Setting the stage for how processing might shift.
Then the Hermann grid, that cool illusion showing perception is constructed, actively edited by the brain.
Yeah, the brain's interpretation, not just raw data.
And finally, how we handle ambiguity. The different styles, the flexibility or rigidity, and that whole surprising historical context.
It's quite a tour through different facets of seeing.
And the core insight, it feels like, across all of this, is that seeing isn't simple. It's not just opening your eyes and letting the world pour in.
Not at all. It's active, it's complex, it's deeply personal, it's a construction happening inside you, shaped by biology, by experience, by mood, by cognitive style. Everything.
Which leaves us with a pretty big thought to chew on, doesn't it? If so much of what you perceive is being actively built and filtered by your own internal systems, well, how much of what you assume is just plain objective reality is actually your unique personal take?
Your constructed reality.
Yeah. And how might knowing that, really taking that on board, change how you look at the world?
Yeah.
And maybe how you look at other people and their realities, too?